think frustration is really important. So for me, the entire academic knowledge that I had, boiled down to nothing because of lack of confidence.
I think as we'll talk about this, I think we're at a really interesting time in educational history, but also in human history.
So we call these skills 21st century skills, SEL, soft skills, human skills.
Everybody agrees on the importance of these skills, right? And the names do change. Children to grow up being able to think well, communicate well, and work together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Toma Club Playbook Podcast. And I'm joined today by two of the most respected people in the tech industry. This is Shreyas Kaushik, your host for the evening, and I am joined by Aaron Seitz from Synthesis, the head of learning experience, and Avinash Bansal, who is the co-founder and CEO of Toma Club. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
So before we dig into the questions, can we have you both quickly introduce yourselves to our audience and what is one passion that is very close to you? Aaron, if we could start with you, please.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I work at Synthesis School, which is Synthesis Teams specifically, which is a program to help kids learn collaborative problem solving through games. My background is in education. So I was a teacher for 18 years before making the switch right after the pandemic into Synthesis. And it's still where my passion is. I think as we'll talk about this, I think we're at a really interesting time in educational history, but also in human history. And so I feel really lucky and excited about how to help shape that future. So it's where my passion is. I have kids, and I'm just really excited to see where all that goes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Avinash.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that story, Aaron. Uh, in my personal opinion, I've been an entrepreneur. I've been an engineer from background. And before Tomo Club, I was running a company. And after my exit from that company, I took a sabbatical to really think what I want to do next. And that was like in 2022. That was like a aftermath of like edtech bubble being busted out. All the funds have gone crazy, and it was like a downtime. And literally every friend of mine in the investor world were like, don't do edtech this time. And I'm like, I'm like, important that you get the right timing, you get the right product. And at that time, I was actually like just got married. So I was thinking having kids with my wife. And at that time, one thought really stuck with me was what kind of school I want my child to go in. And I think that was it. Secondly, from my personal journey, I think I was quite a studious child throughout K-12. But when I entered college, I felt like nobody. And it was really hard for me because I used to look up to kids. I used to look at how they were talking to each other, how they were like presenting on dioceses and hosting events. And I was like, I can never do that. So for me, the entire academic knowledge that I had, boiled down to nothing because of lack of confidence. And I was glad I met really cool friends who really shaped my thought process. And I just felt that I don't want this same emotion or same feeling my child to go through. So I think there was multiple factors which made me move towards social emotional learning or move towards future ready skills as a go-to thing I want to solve for, because it's true, SEL skills are still caught but not taught explicitly. Great teachers, great um, people in my journey has influenced, but there has to be some system. So that was the idea.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And before I hit you both with some heavy questions, I'll perhaps give you a warm-up question because you both work at the intersection of learning science and the real student experience every day. So before getting into the ideas specifically, what is one thing you've seen kids do in a well-designed learning experience that still surprises you both?
Aaron, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I mean, I think what surprises me is the similarity of the pattern of learning. So every time, I see kids in a learning experience, something like synthesis, or I imagine Tomo Club very much the same. They encounter, students will encounter this obstacle, which was intentionally placed there. Let's be clear. We put an
Mhm.
obstacle in front of students, a challenge, and there's this moment of avoidance, right? Of like, whoa, hey, it would be a lot easier if I didn't have to have this obstacle. Like, can you take it away? And we're like, no, you have to overcome this obstacle. And so there's that tension right away of like not wanting to do it. But with that right motivation, and when they overcome that obstacle, no matter how little it is to us, to them it feels, tangible. When they overcome that and they look back on it and say, did you see what I just did? I just overcame that. That moment when they're like, oh my gosh, I can learn, I can overcome this, I can do hard things. That repeated experience, a, it surprises me because it continues to happen, but b, it also surprises me because it's so simple, it's so powerful. And Avinash, like you were saying, it transfers beyond field of study into
Mhm.
something that lasts, into our adult lives.
Yeah, I love that answer. Honestly, I think frustration is really important. In fact, when we also learn everyday basis, if I get something very quickly, most probably I might not remember it later. But okay, at my level, at my experience, what has really fascinated or surprised me is students are way, way smarter than we can think of. And every time we are designing something and I'm trying to think like a 10-year-old, I always end up making a bad product or a bad strategy. All I think kids always want to be treated like adults. So I think that really surprises me that we thought that game is gonna have a 5 hour gameplay and it ended up in like 30 minutes. So that's been crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I think I talked with Aaron on one of his LinkedIn posts as well, because there is a lot of question, lot of doubt when people say, "Oh, you're making a student work for nothing," which perhaps you can just hand it over to them. So there is this divided thought in the edtech industry where some feel, yes, you just have to be very direct, hand over everything to them. But I really love seeing students work together to achieve a solution. And what surprises me the most is it's actually better than what we as adults could have ever designed. So we would not have even, chosen to see a particular thing from their perspective. So I think that is what really makes what we do both at Synthesis as well as Tomo Club really fun for us as builders, as educators, but at the same time, it also carries a huge responsibility to be there for our students and nurture them to be the citizens of tomorrow, which brings me to the first core argument. Perhaps this can be a little heated as well. So we call these skills 21st century skills, SEL, soft skills, human skills. The terminology always keeps shifting. But what
Yeah.
are we exactly talking about? Why do you think that we have struggled to name this very aptly? We do not have one common term. So why do you think this is?
I don't you want to go first? Yeah.
No, no, go ahead. I'll follow you. I'm curious your take.
Okay. I think it's a first of all a cultural concept. And whenever culture is different, people have a different lingo while growing up. I can remember I was reading a online blog or something, and where people blogged soft skills as a program because they thought it will make my kids soft. So so again, it's a cultural thing, right? I remember social emotional learning got a lot of heat lately because I think some curriculum were trying to teach students about sexuality, or they were teaching them about critical race theory. So that became a taboo. That became so. I think it is still very sad I remember in the last 2 years, almost all companies in this sector have renamed themselves. And kind of we also were like are replying the way the person wants to hear, you know. Sometimes we're calling it a leadership skills, sometimes we're calling them character building skills, 21st century skills. So I would really want there should be like one term for it. I think if I have to put my money on it, executive functioning skills might be still something which almost everyone should agree to, but it's still yet to be, get that claim of fame. So yeah, it's a struggle.
It is a struggle, and it's frustrating because it's exactly what you said. Everybody agrees on the importance of these skills, right? Like, and the names do change,
Yeah,
but the skills really don't, right? What we're talking about are skills that are deeply, deeply in the foundation of humanity, right? They are the skills that are both core to us and also float on top of every discipline, every field. So yes, critical thinking, collaboration, the ability to have civil dialogue,
yeah,
divergent thinking, right? Creative thinking, problem solving, empathy, being civic minded, what you brought up. So they are social and emotional, right? But they're also very tactical, right? They are executive functioning. They are something that you will need um, to do very concrete tasks. So they're not just like social emotional, which has this kind of lovey dovey feel, you know. And they're also core to the future. And so we hear things like 21st century skill, and that's true. But the 21st century, we're a quarter of the way through it, and we're still like discovering what these skills are. What are we talking about? Like that will be true of the 22nd century and the 19th century and the 92nd century. Like these are the same skill. I think what's important is, I think it's what you said. Cultures do attach connotation to these skills, but also, ironically, they are the things that bind us. They are above nationality. They are above politics. They're above religion. I don't think anybody would have a disagreement that it's important for children to grow up being able to think well, communicate well, and work together. Like that's everything.
yeah,
So yeah, it's tough. I haven't settled on a name. I really haven't. I like executive functioning. The most recent one I'm hearing is human skills, and I like that and don't like it for the same
yeah,
reason. I like it because I think it's true that this is what binds humans together. And I think with the advent of AI sort of entering into that conversation, that it's a way of putting a boundary up, or at least acknowledging a boundary between what is human and what is not human. But because we're just at the beginning of that conversation, I haven't like settled on that. So everybody knows we need them, yeah, and you're right. We just need a good name. We just we just need everybody to agree on a good name.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the lack of a framework from both federal and state government is also a reason, because people could have called math as arithmetic, or they could have called math logical reasoning, or they could have called math as human skills or scientific skills. They could have named math by hundreds of names if needed be. But there was a core framework, and it was tied to some standardized testing. Although that's another area where I have my huge opinions on, but still, at least it gives an identity to all the schools together and bind them together. So I think there's also a reason why these skills, even though everyone would consider as most important skills, will not be able to spend time to it. Because if my funding is not directly linked to it, it will not become my goal, right? It will just be like a good to have thing. So even though I may understand the correlation, I may understand that it's going to impact academic scores, it's going to impact math scores, reading scores, but what? I can't have, I don't have time, and I don't have any obligation by the state to do it. So time is the biggest currency in schools or in general in life, I would say. But there has to be a certain framework adopted, at least statewide, not if globally.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what's tough about this, because when we talk about an academic discipline like, reading or math or science, it's a lot easier to create a box around it, right? Because we can say all students, regardless of where they are in the country, regardless of where they are in the world, we hold these academic, content principles to be core. Arithmetic, right? Like multiplication, geometry. And we all just shake hands and say, like, we need these. But when you start getting into these human skills, they're very personal and they're rooted in values, and values are rooted in culture and families. And so although you and I, Avinash, might say that we agree that it's important to communicate, or it's important to be able to work on a team.
Yeah,
If you told my daughter, hey, I want you to do it exactly these ways, I would say, well, okay, but actually for her, her values and our family values are a little bit adjacent to that. So really we believe that the best way to work on a team is kind of to inhabit this kind of area, and
yeah,
vice versa. If I told your kids, if I said, hey, I'm Aaron, and I want, here's the way to do it, you'd say,
yeah,
well, okay, but we also like believe these certain things, which put some color into what you're saying. So it becomes very hard. And I think maybe that's the reason why we can't see full adoption, because to put this is where it gets weird, but to put a box around it, in some ways prohibits it from being its full potential. And I know at Tomo Club and Synthesis both, like we're trying to give kids experiences that when they learn, it's inside out. And it's unique to them because
yeah,
they went through the experience on a Tuesday, having a bad day, which is different than if it was on a Friday and they were having a great day, and they would have learned a different lesson from that same experience that you put them through or that I put them through. So yeah, it's really challenging, and there's no easy solution. But I think that the dialogue should include the fact that, why can't we snap our fingers and have every school teach it?
yeah.
Because it's deeply personal and deeply cultural and value laden, which is why it's important, which is why it can't be standardized. It's this weird like loop.
Uh, you know what? I don't agree with that fact at a lot of extent. For example, I'll give an example. So there's one game that we have in which it's a leadership game, and you play in a group setting, and we don't tell them what's the leadership style you should take. Some students in a group setting, they become authoritarian, and they kind of drive the entire conversation. Sometimes the same students, when they perform in a different team setup, they're not able to do well. They have to be more collaborative and not authoritarian. So the student learn to try different leadership styles, and because there is a angle of victory, or not victorious at the end of it, they're able to modulate themselves depending on their team and depending on the game. So I'm not saying that how to teach can be standardized, but what to teach can be standardized. So for example, if we have to teach about active listening, right? And although I also think that it's a constant struggle, I also become a bad listener someday, or unless somebody call me out. So I that's another thing that I believe, these skills are a constant learning. There's never an end to it. But yeah, all I am saying is there has to be a framework which is recognized without telling how to do it. Let the
Yeah.
I think that's true with most of the, actually, until SATs or ACTs, I think until the AP courses, most of the things right now schools have full liberty on to teach. So I think, why can't that happen in SEL as well?
Yeah, I think you're right. If we were to do this right now, the example you gave would say the framework would say something like, discover what leadership styles work best in different situations depending on the team makeup,
Yeah,
right? Something along those lines. And we could put that down. That's a lot. There's a lot there, right? Define leadership, define effective, define team in different styles means that we would need to give students practice in a lot of different situations. To be direct sometimes does work. And sometimes we need to be direct, and authority is needed. And in the very next moment, we need to be more collaborative. And so it gets tricky, because I think you're right that I accept what you're saying, that if we had a list of statements that said, hey, it would be great for students to discover all of these things, that would be great. It would be like a wish list. The hard part is giving that to, usually when we give that to a district, we're saying, okay, off you go, off you go. And there it becomes really, really hard. When I get a standard as a reading teacher, it says, students will know, their phonemes, or they'll be able to, to retell the plot of a story. I can do that in 30 minutes. Here's a story. What was the plot? Yeah, you're in the ballpark or you're not in the ballpark. Harder with the skills we're talking about.
Absolutely. And you both made such a compelling arguments that I feel I'm bound to agree. But at the same time, it makes me a little uncomfortable, because that productive frustration, or even the pain of failures and picking yourself up and giving it a try on a next day, these are all the features of real learning, but not a bug, which sadly is how the school districts perceive this to be. So if a principal or a curriculum director is listening to our episode right now, and they are sold on the idea of 21st century skills, human skills, executive function skills, where would they even start? So what is that first change, which perhaps is tangible, and what does it look like inside a school that's running a traditional academic program, and that which motivates them to make a switch to include the human skills aspect? Because as Avinash rightly pointed out, there are no frameworks, or there are no compulsions at the moment. So how would these changes look like that motivates a district leader to make ACL a part of their traditional curriculum as well?
I would love to know your opinion first, Aaron.
Yeah, this is exactly, I think, the conversation where it starts, which is, this is not something, I don't think, that you can simply implement with, if I sent you a binder, that you could just implement it effectively. We're talking about looking at the purpose and the methodology of education in a different way than is conventional, is traditional. So I taught in a public school. I was a trained teacher. I had professors and doctors of education who were pouring on best practices onto me, and all of them had the same lens, which is the current conventional lens, which is that of efficiency. We have a lot to teach teachers. So any teachers who are listening, curriculum directors, administrators, they're all like, we have to get through a lot of content. How do we do that with the least waste? The least waste of time, the least waste of energy. How do we get students proficient and even above proficient within this time frame? That's a lot to do. So when efficiency drives the model, we do what is efficient. We remove friction, we remove obstacle. We do tried and true methods. We look for the things that are the most universally accepted, and we bring kids towards the middle. And we do that. This is not a bad thing. This is what educators are asked to do, because they're asked to hit standards by the end of the year. When we're talking about skills like leadership, communication, things that are discovered, they cannot be discovered except through experience. So putting kids in an experience, Avinash, the one that you had, like, hey, there's a leadership thing. We're not going to tell you how to do it. You're going to go through that. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but chances are that was a messy, dynamic, like authentic environment that you didn't prescribe what was going to happen at every single minute. It happened. Okay. By definition, that is inefficient. It would have been more efficient for you to say, here are 4 leadership styles, right? Memorize them. I'm going to give you a test on them. Okay. Use these 4 in life. Bye. Okay. Doesn't work. So what we're asking people who are listening to do, educators, is to think within this efficiency model. to take the first step, is there a lesson or a unit, right? Just a small bucket of time, a small unit of time where you could experiment with something that's more authentic, something that's more experiential. Kids, for the next 3 days, here's an open-ended problem where even I don't know the solution. You're going to be in teams. Most of you are going to fail. Some of you are going to succeed. And I can't tell the future. I have no control over this. I'm going to be observing you. I'm going to be taking notes, but I'm not going to be telling you what to do because that's what's going to happen when you leave me. You're on your own, right? So this is a simulation of that environment. And by the way, this could happen in a science class, in a literature class, in a math class. You have this challenge. You got 3 days. Good luck. What will happen is, I can predict this, if they're in a conventional system, it will be chaos at first, and then there will be a lot of, because you're forcing them into a new environment. And at the end of it, when there was, a lots of failure and emotions, you'll say, okay, what are you feeling right now? What's going through your head? What felt easy? What felt hard? And you'll get a lot. You'll get a lot of real reflection. I didn't know what to do. They were complaining, nobody was working as hard as I was. You didn't give us instructions. But if you said to that team, okay, if I gave you another shot, could you do better? I will guarantee you that every single class will say, yeah, give us another shot. Give us another shot. We can do it. We can do it. And they will. And they'll improve. So problem is that takes time. So you need administrators who are patient and saying, I want my faculty to experiment. Just take one chunk, faculty. Experiment if you want. And it takes faculty who have to flip their brains to say, today I'm not a teacher. I'm not top down. I'm not efficiency. Today I'm a coach. Today I'm a guide. Today I'm just going to step back and take notes. They're in charge. And then I will lead that discussion. That is a big shift from how we were trained.
That's quite a story, and I think that really paints a picture in my head. Um, I have few proven strategies that I've actually tried in schools with school leaders. First thing that I always tell them is pick up 10 people in your community, maybe 5 different parents or 5 different administrators, and ask them one question. List 3 skills that you think has made you successful. And I can put my money 100% on it that they'll say maybe one hard skill, maybe accounting or designing or coding, whatever they've learned. But most of them will say the soft skills or the executive functioning skills for their success. So once you put that out as a short video, automatically everyone in their school, your parents, your community will start to understand that this is the new definition of successful adult. Uh, just getting grades, getting a degree will not make you successful. So I think very easy to do, like 30-minute, 1 hour exercise to propagate something like this in your community is do this quick 10-question survey and you'll get the answer. Also, I think the definition of good student is mostly academic driven, or in the worst case is the behavior referral or disciplinary data. There is a lot in the middle, right? You can't just say, okay, somebody is doing good in grades, that's great. Somebody who's in detention or suspension is bad. I think there's a lot in the middle. So unless you have some system of assessment, I don't know what it can be. I hate surveys, but I think survey at least is one way to actually start putting out uh, so that it's taken seriously. Whenever you are talking to a teacher or whenever you're talking to a parent and you're talking in reference to a student, you look them as a human with one is academic performance and one is their emotional or their mental faculties on human skills. Damn, it's hard to name one skill. It's so many names. So I think that can be second way is assessment. Third, one of the small thing that I've done that have worked really well is you can't expect teachers to only embed these skills in daily instruction and say it's done. I think Aaron also mentioned about dedicated time slot. There has to be some dedicated time slot given to it. Because if you look at efficiency, if you look at simplicity, Of course, making kids watch a video on how to be a good leader or how to be a good student or how to be a good citizen, it's always easier. But it doesn't take a bright mind to think that those videos is very passive and it won't work. So one small idea is in that once a week session, why don't you have mixed age kids? I think it has worked a lot great in Montessori. Uh, at least even in middle school and high school, the senior junior relationship is beautiful. I remember when I was in school, we have these clubs, and I think most I learned was from my seniors, and most time I got revision or I got reminded of my concepts was when I was telling my juniors. So I think that senior junior relationship has to be more cemented in like once a week at least. So yeah, those are the few ideas.
I love that. And think about what you're doing when there's a junior senior mixed stage. And that's a great method, even at the primary levels where, you know, a grade 5 goes into a grade 2 and reads a book with them. It's a confidence builder, it's empathy, it's communication, right? It's a lot of skills that are hovering underneath the surface. But I think what you said is important is that it's not enough just to say, hey, sprinkle these in. And I always like to, when I talk to teachers and administrators, I like to say, okay, if that's all it is, we can sprinkle things in. Let's just flip it. So have a class called creative problem solving, where the explicit, stated, direct reason for being in the class is every day to work on divergent solutions to really complex problems. And while you're in that, just sprinkle in math for their whole year. And there'll be a math credit for them. But just sprinkle in the math. The math teacher would say, whoa, 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 you're kidding me, right? Sprinkle in the math? You can't sprinkle in math. You have to teach it every day. And yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't sprinkle in creative problem solving, So make some time for it. And this is hard. Like I want to be really clear. Teachers they don't have excess time,
Yeah.
right? They're not just sitting around being like, I have no idea. Teachers who are listening, I fully understand that you are minute to minute. And even at the end of a year, you didn't get through it all. And if you got through it all, you didn't get through it all as much, as deeply as you wanted to. That's just the content. So if we say to them, oh, and by the way, also add in this full layer that is massive and will displace what you're doing, they're like, how? That's a
Yeah.
real issue. And we have to be, as educators, we have to not, enmify teachers who are like not doing it right, or administrators who are being assessed themselves on the scores of those academic, right, content. Like that's where they're coming from. So it really is, it's a tricky problem. And I love exactly what you said. If our purpose is to prepare kids for the future, let's ask the adults in the community what matters. I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's a great idea, because if they say, my math class prepared me, my science, my reading class, those are the things that prepared me for where I am now. It was what I learned in that, you know, grade 10. Then great, we're doing a good job. If they say, honestly, I don't use a lot of that stuff. I use a lot of these skills that I wish I would have had, then we should listen and we should start reframing the standards, or reframing what we teach and when and for how long. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So you both agree that these skills need to be trained and not just taught, just like any other subject out there, because we do need to make that neural connections, and for that to stick for an extended period of time, it has to be something which is part of your daily curriculum. And just quickly pivoting to our core method, which is game-based learning. So it is seen as, a pariah even today. So most people, when we say games, they usually go and think about arcades, shooting games, or racing simulations, whereas our games has a deep pedagogy, deep thought. We have involved a lot of different experts, poured in thousands of hours, and developed this as a core method. So why is experience the right pedagogy here, where traditional instruction falls short?
Yeah, Avinash, go ahead.
Okay. I think I'll tell you something very funny. So even as an adult, sometimes my mom think that when I'm on my laptop, I'm playing games. So, and I literally do testing and all. But I think at least for millennial parents, it might not be the same situation right now because our life is revolving around screens a lot more than a generation above. So when they look at computers, they look at through entertainment or through that lens. So but yeah, at the same time, the teachers and the school leaders or who we're dealing with, they are have an average age of 45 right now. So they are definitely still have that notion that laptop or a screen is not serious stuff and it's more around entertainment and fun. So I think that's one of the reason. Um, Plus, I would say it's kind of true because right now, if you see, there is so many articles coming out, Scandinavian countries banning screens, um, and I have mixed opinions on. So I'm not in either side. I'm not saying that oh it should not be banned, or I'm not saying that it should be banned. So I think it's a fairly new concept, I would say, one-on-one screens in the schools. And gaming is even more younger than that in that way. So yeah, I think the bias is fair. Uh, I have no problem with that. But dismissing it altogether is bad. So you need to have a curious mindset. You need to have an inquiry-based attitude towards any new thing. So ask me questions. Why we have built a game? Why do you think so? Some school leaders tell me that, hey, my kids are into sports. I said, great. You They are doing fantastic because the sportsmanship, you learn so many things. Um, Provided sometimes it can be toxic environment as well. If you are have only those 11 kids who are competing and you have 1,000 kids for that 11 seats. So my simple ideology is we have come up with games because I believe that is the best methodology to actively engage every single kid. None of the kids in the classroom can be sitting idle or consuming passively. They have to move their hands, they have to do something, they have to talk. Tell me other methodologies which can do this, and I am all ears. We have tried conundrums. We used to do these video-based sessions where, you watch a story and then you have to contribute to it. It's the same set of two or three kids who are talking again and again. And the rest of the kids are like, whatever. Okay, last thing that I want to say. So in a game setup, especially you'll see around the age of like 10, kids start pulling each other back if they talk in the class. They give them a stink eye, they call them know-it-all and everything. So contributing in a class becomes a lot more challenging in a social setting. But whenever in a game, they say something that, hey, I did this, I did that, everybody is appreciating. Nobody is judging. And in fact, they find it cool. Even the so-called cool kids find this relevant. So I think ask questions, why games? And I think I'll have a lot more answers.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And let's sort of draw some boundaries. So the negative connotations around games and education are for two reasons, and they are both legitimate. So there is a type of game. So if we called like gamified learning, so gamified learning is, very simply like, you know, take your pirate ship and go to this question and answer it. And if you answer it correctly, you get a gold coin. Then go to the next one and you get 2 gold coins. If you get 3 gold coins, then you get to use your pirate ship to shoot a cannonball. Okay, that's just questions and answers with a video game overlaid over the top of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's like gamified learning, and and the people who create those games will say, all right, well, that helps them learn the concepts, but that's not what we talk about. What you and I talk about when we mean games and learning, games as pedagogy, games as methodology. So let's take that and throw it to the side because we're not advocating that they play more of those games. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think those are good. I don't think those are good methods. The other type of method, the other type of like game design is the intent behind the game. What are the games optimized for? So,
Hmm.
most of the games that kids play on a screen, on a device, they're optimized for time spent on the game. So these are dopamine hits, right? Same with social media, right? Social media is designed to give us a dopamine hit when we refresh, when we linger. So it's not trying to teach us. Social media and these games, they aren't trying to instruct. They're not optimized for that. They're optimized for our dopamine and for our minutes. So those games that are optimized for our attention are appropriately should be appropriately cautious, skeptical. Like let's take a critical eye to those. What you and I are talking about and the way that you and I design, I'm doing this right now. I'm designing a summer camp for kids that uses games to develop human skills. Okay, so why and how? First of all, these games are not optimized for attention. They are purposely confusing. They have no instructions. If they were optimized for attention, it would be easy to get involved. No, they're hard because the skill that I want them to practice is working through confusion. So I create an environment that has some confusion built into it. As they figure it out, I can level those, I can turn the knobs and levers to make those scenarios more challenging to reach the goal. So now they have to engage in analytical critical thinking. I can adjust the levers so that one person's actions alone cannot achieve victory. So they need to bring in everybody. They need to coordinate. The failure to coordinate means they lose the game. So really what we're talking about here are games as simulations, as real world simulations put in the abstract form of a game. And this can be in person too. You know, you're talking about a leadership game that you played in person. It doesn't have to be on a screen. The reason why games work, game design, game methodology works, is because it feels high stakes. They want to win. And so because the results are real, the emotions are real. Their brains are activated. They're not just sitting there being like, okay, we get it. They are activated. And yet, at the same time, they're low stakes. So they're feeling real frustration, right? They're feeling real elation when they win. But at the end of the day, the game goes away. It was a simulation and it evaporates. So what's left when it evaporates is that lesson, right? And so my plan for the summer camp is to say, okay, set a goal. What are you trying to work on? You know, I'm trying to work on staying calm under pressure. Okay, I'm going to send you into an environment that has pressure. It's going to feel real. You're going to feel pressure. And then when they get out, if they were successful or if they crashed and burned and yelled and got frustrated, it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to get them to an outcome. I'm trying to set conditions for them so that when they get out, I say, how did it go? What worked? What didn't? What can you improve on? And they're like, well, yeah, I started to get heated. I felt myself getting flushed. Okay, could you try again? What would you try differently? Maybe I'll try taking a deep breath, run it again, run it again, run it again, run it again. So I don't see growth in students, you know, in a summer camp after one session. It is not a 60-minute thing. I do see growth after multiple repetitions. I do see growth after multiple weeks when they're able to say, "Oh my gosh, I was just in that environment, and last time I freaked out, and now I'm feeling like I'm familiar with it." That familiarity, I would argue, games are the best for, because then when they go into the world and they encounter a high stress situation, their brain says, "Oh yeah, I've been here before. Yep, I know what to do. Okay, got it."
No, I agree. And I love that point. I always tell my school leaders, I'm making money from you, not from the kids' attention. So simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best moment that comes to mind when you're talking about this is this dialogue from the film Bruce Almighty, where Morgan Freeman says, like, if you pray for patience, do you think God gives you patience straight away, handed to you on a platter, or you're put into a situation where you'll be motivated to show more patience? So I think the same thought or the idea sticks and is more relevant to this aspect as well. And moving to the final part, which is one of the most frequently discussed topic, AI in education. So I have two parts into this. So one is specifically around how AI is removing struggles. It's making things faster, smoother, easier. And we've argued this in the first part itself, where we saw the struggle or the positive frustration is exactly what builds deep learning. So my question or the tension that I keep coming back to is, does AI by design make education more shallow?
That caught me off guard. I was not expecting that question. Um, I'm thinking, Aaron, do you have an answer immediately?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So, does it make education more shallow? I would say not necessarily. Um, I'm trying to draw a parallel. So, excuse the messiness of this parallel, and I know it's used a lot. So, when the calculator, replaced hand arithmetic, we didn't stop teaching hand arithmetic, right? Arithmetic by hand, but we do use a calculator to check an answer. So is the calculator preventing, is it necessarily preventing me from learning, math fluency? No. Can it? It can. It's a danger. But we don't really feel like the calculator has done that, right? We use it as a tool, but we don't allow it to take over. The issue is that AI is omnipresent, and it's able to solve anything. It's not a calculator. It's an everything. It's an everything. And it's being used as an everything. So if you tell kids, hey, don't use this because it's going to, atrophy your brain, they're not going to say, okay, we won't. They're going to say, hey, Aaron, I've got a tool that I'm going to use. I'm just going to use it because it makes life easy on me. So we have to accept that the cat is out of the bag, right? The genie is out of the bottle. It exists. So telling kids you should never use it is probably, that ship has sailed. I don't think we can do that anymore. I think what we can say is we can up the stakes. We can say, um, you know, here's a community problem in our local area. Maybe there's something with housing, or there's a festival coming up, and the community needs help, you know, designing it and executing on it. You're going to do that. You're going to be the class that does that. I have no instructions. I have no right answers for you, but you're going to do this. And whether you succeed or fail is entirely onto you. Can we use AI? Sure, but you better be careful, because if you use AI and the whole thing falls apart and you say, well, I talked to AI, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy. So sure, use it all you want. But you better be sure that at the end of that is your human decision-making skill. AI can give you answers, but it's humans that make the decisions based on that. By the way, this is the same thing that we're hearing out of businesses, out of military, organizations who are saying, listen, we're using these things, but we don't need people who can use them. We need people who can actually make decisions with information. So please, please, please don't become over reliant on it. So I don't think that AI will make education more shallow. I think it can, but it's not necessarily going to happen. I think it's really how we challenge students and what we challenge them with. And as long as that is just outside of their comfort zone, and AI isn't able to just sweep that away, I think we'll find a place where both can exist. That said, I think we're really early. I don't think anybody's doing it perfectly. And so I'm really encouraged by the people who are having the dialogue, the three of us included, who are not saying, this is a solved problem, but the people who are saying, I tried this and it worked, but I'm nervous, or the people who are saying, I tried this and it didn't work, and here's why, and maybe it'll work for you. But we definitely need to be aware of this wave and not just say, everybody everybody should be using this tool. How can AI solve everything? We should be saying, what type of human beings do we want kids to be? And then if we answer that, then let's work backwards. If AI is part of that, cool. If it's not, cool. But it shouldn't overtake that conversation.
Hmm. Um, I agree with all the points that you mentioned, Aaron, but honestly, in my opinion, that kind of thought process comes with a lot more awareness and a lot more conscious attitude. In my opinion, humans in general are lazy. I am lazy. It's very hard to go to hit the gym daily. If I get a room of being lazy, I fall back to my old habits. So I think we are inherently lazy. So yes, in my opinion, AI will make education shallow. Even if I tell kids that, hey, you will be judged on like you will be graded badly, there'll be a AI plagiarism tool and everything. We'll find loopholes. So in my opinion, um, unless we unless we incentivize thinking, AI will be the go-to thing to do because it's easy. So I'll give you an example. Recently, I was hiring for a video editor for my team, and I put up a post on LinkedIn and I gave a short assignment, and I got a lot more applications. And literally, all the submissions were 90% similar, which is very obvious. They just put it through the chat GPT and then they got the answers, and I could see it through. Now, but as a person, I know that using ChatGPT is a good thing because then they'll be efficient in my team. But I don't want their output to be similar to everyone's. So literally, we hired the one person, shares with me, whose answers were more legit and whose answer were more felt personal and creative and thinking. So in this particular example, we hired that person. So we incentivized somebody who was thinking and not somebody who was just using AI to get their answers. Now, what will happen is if that particular person keeps on applying to three more companies, the other candidates we didn't hire, and they're not getting chosen, they will have to think what's going wrong. And then they will analyze that, oh my God, it's because I'm not creatively investing in the assignment or in the task, I'm not getting shortlisted. So if we have a similar kind of incentivization for thinking, then you can make people not be heavily reliant on AI. Otherwise, it's the most obvious thing that will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of agree with both the points in this context, because from the last 6 months that I've observed this field, there is inherently, in my opinion, a fatal flaw that most of the educators are committing, which is telling us to balance AI with the mainstream curriculum. And I find it has a fatal flaw because balance would mean a 50-50 divide, which unfortunately life is not built around this balance. Because even when people say work-life balance, I usually come back and just think, is life meant to be a 50-50 balance? Because no instance or no historical evidence points to a 50-50 divide, which is where it is important to change the language towards introducing harmony instead of balance. So one day it might be 70-30 in favor of AI, the next day it might be the opposite. So this harmony is what perhaps will make the education go towards either side. So it cannot be thought of as a linear projection. Rather, it would be more or less a harmonious relationship that you should have. Because on most days, as Avinash said, we are bound to using machines, using systems. So inherently, because of evolution, we are in a way becoming more lazier. So that is when AI can perhaps come and do your job. But there are also instances where you will have to just go and get the job done yourself. So that is when the other side will get a win. And ultimately, it is all about seeing where this harmony has led us to. So that brings me to the final question. We have perhaps read Dan Mayer's obituary for Khanmigo, especially regarding the AI tutoring. So I just want to open the stage for both of you, because I know Synthesis is already doing tutoring based programs. And Avinash, we have at Tomo Club discussed this idea of bringing in an effective tutor. So my question is very simple. What do you make out of this particular fiasco with Khanmigo, especially the failures, and how do you see this idea being progressed forward? Because in my opinion, what Dan Mayer wrote feels a little one-sided. The way I see it would be to see this as an end of one particular idea, not the domain itself. So from now on, there will be many companies that will definitely come and innovate because the message has gone out loud and clear. So I'll open the stage to both of you to answer this.
Hmm. Okay. I think it was too fast, too early. Education doesn't work like a VC business, in my opinion. Um, so you can't expect things to turn overnight. So you have to look at the numbers and data with an open mind, without a bias. So if you have seen that students are not clicking on Khanamigo and you make Khanamigo as a centerpiece in all your products, so the numbers will be fudged, right? It will show activity, but in reality, there's no activity. So I think, especially if you enjoy such a huge scale, I think you can have much more planned rollout and quicker course correction. Not every company can afford that. They could have. So I think that would have helped, in my opinion. And that's one about this particular scenario. About AI tutoring, if you're asking me, um, I don't know. I am still in the negative side of AI tutoring. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. It is going to happen, but at the current stage of the technology. So I've tried AI coaches. I've tried multiple things, and I just feel to drop out very easily. While if there's a human checking on me, I don't know. I'm still not able to put it into a very rational thought that, for example, like AI movies, like AI content. So again, I'm still having that. Is it just because of the quality or because I know it's the AI? Am I feeling it's fake? I'm feeling cheated upon. I don't know. There is something which is not hitting at the right spot of why I'm not accepting it. Um, Even if I see some brand ads on AI, I completely discard. So I've tried AI reel or AI content in-house, and I've always said, no, let's just put a face to it. So I think it's my bias from social motion learning in itself that I value human still a lot more. But what if the line gets very blurry of AI tutoring and real human tutoring? uh, Maybe then I can get on board. As of now, I just don't have that kind of consistency with AI coaches. And I have tried. I tried an AI fitness coach. I tried AI coaching me, but a marketing skills for myself. And I was very easy. It was easy to drop out. They could not hold me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, the bottom line is it's early. It's too early. I think, and also I think if you read, if the context matters with the Conmigo thing, right? So, you know, Dan Meyer is saying because Sal Khan said kids weren't drawn to it, therefore all AI in education probably won't work. That's a big stretch, Dan. And I like Dan Meyer. I like his critical view. I think he's a great voice for stop putting the brakes on the hype. I think he's great at doing that, and I hope he continues to do it. But let's remember that Khan Academy is a very conventional based pedagogy. It is trying to make the efficiency model in the conventional school more efficient. That is its job. It is not an innovative pedagogy. It is not a brand new way of thinking about school. It's exactly the way we've always done school, except just really efficiently on a screen with powered by Khan Academy. So when Conmigo enters that, and he's like, weirdly, kids weren't motivated by it because it's in a conventional system where kids are generally unmotivated because they're in a conventional model that's not challenging them to think with this content, to apply it elsewhere, to solve a real problem, like to put their reputation on the line. Um, so, um, so yeah, I mean, it's not the same. It's not the same metaphor, right? So I think there are other products, there are other experiences. The synthesis tutor, for example, it's not perfect either, but it's not meant to be put in. It's not meant to replace anything. It's a supplement, right? It's a way for kids to build a foundation. Well, if that can let the teacher, motor around and work on other obstacles, then that's a great second lens, right? That's a great second pair of eyes. Yeah, so I felt like Dan's approach was saying, it was a bit of a shot there, but Avinash, I'm with you. I think it's too early. It's too early to tell uh, how it's going to be used, but I can't see a future where it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I've used it with my own daughter. I've given her the synthesis tutor. She's motivated sometimes, and other times not. I've created GPTs to teach her language and to create stories with her. Sometimes she's motivated, sometimes she's not. Never do I say, "Here is your teacher." Like, here is
Mhm.
how you're going to learn, right? Of course, I would never do that. So yeah, I think we'll see, and I think we have to be careful not to say, again, it's like we've been talking about. We have to be careful not to say it's impossible. It can never work ever. That's too binary. And we can't say it will solve all problems. Just put them in front of an AI and everything will be great. Come on, folks. There is a lot of gray area. It's very early. Let's be honest. Let's experiment and be vulnerable about when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And when it does, maybe it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your views. It indeed is helpful to have different perspectives as the landscape evolves at a speed where we are often, catching up to the technological advancements. So to close out our conversation, if a school leader finishes listening to this episode today and wants to take one step, just one step towards building these human skills or executive function skills intentionally inside the school, what's one move you'd recommend?
I think I already touched upon it. Please dedicate one time slot in a week, um, whatever time length it may allow as per your schedule, but dedicate. At least give it the serious time it deserves.
Yeah, and I would just say have the conversation, have that first principles conversation. Um, you don't need to implement anything, but ask your faculty, what do you think are the most important skills in life? Bring in a series of community members, have them say the same thing. Bring in recent grads and say, do you feel like you're prepared for the world because of the work that we did with you? If you're getting signals that everything is in complete alignment, great, keep doing what you're doing. If you're getting signals that there's misalignment, start that conversation. Just start the conversation and then know that there's a lot of resources. The people on this screen, call me. I'll come and consult your district. Like, we have a lot of resources of ways to help, but start the conversation.
Absolutely. So thank you, Aaron and Avinash, for taking your valuable time to speaking with us and sharing your valuable insights. I'm sure the listeners would definitely take a point or two to work on. And to our listeners on Spotify and viewers on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not done this before, please do like, share, and subscribe to our channels. I've added both Aaron's and Avinash's links in the comments. Please do reach out to them, give them a follow, and have this conversation with them if you do feel so. And this is Shreyas, your host at Tomo Club, signing off. We'll meet you with a new guest very soon. So until then, take care.